Can you tell me your name?
I'm Cindy Royal, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Texas State University.
Okay. Now tell me about your letter to Wired magazine that you posted on your blog.
Well, as a longtime reader and subscriber to Wired, and someone who has endorsed it with my students over the years, I always presented it with the caveat that while it has great articles, very important, innovative articles about the future of technology and culture, there was always this aching feeling that they didn't necessarily represent women well, that they were either not recognized at all, or when they were objectified in some manner, particularly on their covers. And so I'd always kind of had that in the back of my mind. I'd mentioned it to students in the past, and this last issue came out that had the cover that had two breasts, no head, no rest of the body, just a couple of breasts, accompanying an article on tissue engineering. But when I opened up my mailbox with my usual excitement about getting Wired, and I saw this picture right there, I couldn't believe that Wired had done this. And it took me a couple weeks to really formulate how it was making me feel. And I grew to understand that it was making me feel like someone had disappointed me. Somebody I really cared about had disappointed me. And that's how I got the idea to write this blog post in the form of a breakup letter, in that, I really love and respect you, however, you're hurting me. And not only are you hurting me, but you're hurting the people that I'm recommending it to, my students, who I really want to encourage the female students and the male students to go into technology, but I can't have in good conscience a recommendation for a publication that's perpetuating stereotypes. Well, I do have this tech blog that I write on when I have a tech issue that I want to talk about. I also have a music blog that I spend a lot more time on. I go to shows, I interview musicians. So this blog was the right place to post this idea. But I was surprised by the attention it got because it was a blog that doesn't get much traffic and that I don't use very often. So I think it demonstrates the power of social media beyond just the traffic that you have on your blog, the way that other social media tools can drive people and the way that people can share that information can drive people across the world to something that they feel is important or that they want to engage in the discussion. I made a blog post. I posted it on Twitter, and I posted it on my Facebook. And that is all I have done. The rest of it spread virally on its own. I have a number of Twitter followers. I have a number of people on Facebook who follow me or are my friends on Facebook. But I think it just struck a nerve where so many people wanted to share it and then wanted to comment on it.
So how do you feel about your professor making the news for her letter to Wired magazine?
I think it's absolutely amazing. I think Cindy's a very smart woman, and I think that she definitely has a lot to say, and I think it's a great point for, Wired magazine editors and readers to understand what she's saying, and I think it's really cool how fast the message spread through basically social media. It just shows the power of social media.
I think it's great. I think it's an important issue, and I'm glad. It's surprising, of course, that she got this much coverage about it, but it's pretty neat.
I got really excited, and I actually got even more interested the more the furor and the buzz around it built. I thought that was really cool.
I think it's amazing. Honestly, at first, I obviously had no idea that this was going to happen. And then when I went to class last night, we were actually talking about it with my other professor. And I found it interesting that that A, social media is booming so much, and B, that her comments and her article made such an impact, especially on Wired. He replied, the editor of the magazine replied immediately, which I thought was pretty phenomenal. So
I think it's a bit ridiculous. I think that it's pretty shallow of Wired to stoop to that level. I think they're doing it as a sex sells kind of thing, and their main strategy is just to use sex in order to sell their magazine. And I think it's ridiculous.
It's definitely a bit gratuitous. I would feel uncomfortable reading it in public, honestly.
I think it's pretty, but I don't think it's appropriate for Wired. It would be kind of hard to deny how pretty the cover is. But even though the article is about tissue engineering, I think there are other other ways that the subject matter could be presented. You could show a lab. You could show an operating room. You could show even graphs and charts and things of that nature. Business Week, whenever they talk about stock market crash, they don't show nude women talking about how they can't afford underwear. So it really has little to do with the subject matter.
I actually saw it for the first time today, and I have to say that in pictures it looks a lot different than it does in real life. And I have to say that when I first saw the image on the front, I was very offended. I was already offended when I had read about it and had seen the magazine online, but not when I saw it in person. I really got a different idea about things. So,
were you more or less, would you say, offended when you saw it in person?
I was definitely more offended, for sure. I was like, oh my gosh, they really put this on a magazine. And it was very graphic and real looking, and I understand that was probably maybe not the focus, but that's what happened. And they definitely took that to the extreme.
In terms of how Chris Anderson found it, I'm not really sure. I'm assuming that Wired has Google alerts or something set up when anybody talks about their publication. I think there was enough discourse around it in social media that it probably had to rise to the surface for them. And I have to give him credit for addressing the issue very quickly. He was one of the early commenters the second day, like the day after I made the post. So that is to their they are to be commended for the fact that they responded to this so quickly.
What is Chris Anderson's position now?
He's the editor-in-chief, I believe, is his title. So he's the man in charge of Wired. I felt that in addition to letting Wired know how I felt, I needed to make a public stance on this because I had recommended Wired to so many of my students over the years. So I needed to put it in a place where people could see it and where I could then use social media tools to let my students know that this is how I feel about it. I just couldn't continue to endorse Wired in the same enthusiastic manner, and all the people that I had endorsed it to in the past needed to know about that. Again, I'm encouraged by the fact that he even responded at all. I feel that Wired was prepared to defend the one cover, but not necessarily the pattern that I indicated in my blog post. And so while he had a lot of reasons why they chose the breasts image to go along with the tissue engineering story and how he felt that it was not objectifying or not necessarily offensive to anyone, he was not able to really defend the history of Wired's depiction of women over the years. And when we took the conversation onto email, he did admit that Wired could do a better job, and he asked that I be part of a brainstorming session to creatively address these issues. I'm not sure what the nature of that session will be yet, but I'm happy to get involved in any way I can because I am such a fan of the magazine. A little overwhelmed and exhausted is how I'm feeling right now about this, but really energized by the discussion that's been generated by it. The fact that a single blog post could get so much mainstream media attention and that hundreds of people would go online to make their views known about it. People around the world are talking about this, and I just received so many emails and comments from parents of Texas State students or former students. People told me we had a conversation about this in my class, or my husband and I talked about it over dinner, or our newsroom had a heated conversation about this. So I just think it's really promising that so many people care about this issue, regardless of their stance on it, and that we got people talking about the importance of gender representations in media.
I thought with her not only talking about the historical covers for Wired, but also showing examples of them, and even referencing articles and topics that she didn't have to show examples on. I thought that her letter was very well documented, and I thought it was sort of a fumble for the editor of Wired to even try to address it in the way that he did. I don't think he even addressed the point. I think he tried to make excuses instead.
Well, my position now is that I am going to break up with Wired. I'm not going to renew my subscription, but more importantly, I'm not going to endorse it to my students any longer until I see some sort of sustained pattern of change. And I'm encouraged by the fact that they want to be involved in this discourse. Fast Company magazine has quickly jumped into the fray on this, in that they posted this week that they were going to have a cover with a female executive from Twitter on it for their next issue. They referenced the Pointer chat that I did with the Pointer Institute on Friday. So I see it's not only an issue about Wired, but it's media in general really responding to this idea that women are having contributions in technology, and they deserve respect, and they need to be recognized for these contributions. So I am definitely open to the possibility of reconciliation with Wired, and I really hope for that, because I do really enjoy reading the magazine and using it in classes. Well, there are women with contributions in technology, and they need to be recognized for that. They're not invisible, and they shouldn't just be recognized for their bodies. It creates what I consider to be an unfriendly environment in the tech industry, which may discourage women from going into it. It may discourage women from becoming a part of the conversations about articles that are in Wired. It just makes for an environment where they feel like it's a boys' club, or they're on the outside looking in. And I have often felt like that when reading Wired. So I don't want my students to feel that way. I have courses that I teach in computer labs that often are the majority of women as students in them. I see the way women respond to technology concepts, how they love it when it's presented to them in a communications context, how many of them have used these skills to take them into their careers. So there's nothing gender oriented about being in a technology career. It's just the culture of the environment. And I think Wired as a publication, they are such an influential publication that they have the power to help change this if they choose to. I guess I would say that this is more about my responsibility to my students than it is my individual tastes or something that offended me. I just feel that it's very important for me to, one, not recommend publications that I feel may be detrimental to my students in some way, or make them feel that they're not able to participate in something. But at the same time, I feel that it's just important that in a mass communication program that we have these discussions about gender representation, and we use it as sort of a learning opportunity, as well as a learning opportunity on the power of social media. So this has really been an interesting exercise in so many different aspects.
I'm glad that the topic got brought up. I have the same irritation. If I'm reading a car magazine, I don't want some girl in a bikini leaning on the fender. I want to be looking at the car. If I want to read a bikini magazine, I'll pick up a bikini magazine, which, by the way, I don't. But if I want to read a bikini magazine, that's what those are for. Car magazines are for cars, and Wired is for tech, not for boobs.
It's hard enough for women to be in technology in the first place, and when a very recognized publication such as Wired produces a magazine like this with that kind of cover, it's a huge, it's almost a bash to women, just completely and totally, just very showing women that they are very disrespectful towards them and very derogatory, and honestly that they really don't care about what it is that women think about, because they think that men are the most important thing in society, and they're the one that lead every type of professional career, when in reality that's not the case. And I think it gives women the wrong impression about technology, and it kind of shoos them away from it. And I think Cindy has done a really good job of explaining to women that, hey, you can go out there and you can do this because we're just as smart as men are, and we are capable of working in the technology field.